Well, everybody, draft day has arrived once again. So here is my 2021 NFL mock draft. I've been doing these since 2012. They're never any good, but I always get questions if I'm going to do another one. So sure, I will. I'll give it my best shot. I like the thought process going through the mock draft and just seeing all the different possibilities. I have a couple ideas of how the draft could start. Everything obviously depends on what happens at 3 and 4 this year. It's a deep quarterback class. How fast do they go? There's a lot of receivers, tackles, and then defense. We'll get there when we get there. Going back to last year's mock draft, I got 5 picks right and then 2 players to the right team at the wrong spot. So I had Burrow, Young, Okuda, 1, 2, 3. I had Henderson at 9 going to the Jaguars. Javon Kinlaw in the wrong spot to San Francisco, had AJ Terrell to the Falcons, and Patrick Queen to the Ravens. So pretty much all common picks from last year. Didn't get any of my long shots right. That's all I care about. I want the long shot to be right. And if you'd like, I also have down below in the description my NFL.com Predict the Pick group. You can join that, submit your mock draft, and we'll see who's top of the leaderboard, and maybe I'll go through it tomorrow. I imagine I'll be streaming and recapping round 1, unless for some reason it's not exciting, and I can't see that happening. It's the 2021 NFL Draft coming off of 2020 and a strange college football season. Many players who didn't have a season. Some players haven't played in over a year. Some players have 1 year of tape. It's a strange draft, and I expect nothing but pure chaos. And that's part of why I think the first night of the draft is better than the Super Bowl. It is so fun watching teams make moves, potential home run picks, potential major mistakes. We're going to get a little bit of everything. So let's get into it. The Jacksonville Jaguars have been on the clock, number 1, when it looked like the Jets would pick number 1 for a while. And they are going to select Trevor Lawrence, quarterback from Clemson. We've been waiting on this one now for a few years, ever since he started playing at Clemson and shined immediately. He's been fun to watch. Can't wait to see how he plays in Jacksonville. I like a lot of the players they have in that offense. And with Urban Meyer, I wonder what they're going to do to expand upon it. So we know that one, and Zach Wilson to the Jets. That's basically been set in stone now for a couple months. 2020 was a hard year to build draft stock, but Zach Wilson surely did with a great year at BYU. Really exciting player. And we'll see if this is the right quarterback finally for the Jets, who have been looking for a very long time. But the draft really starts at number 3. San Francisco, with their aggressive move to go up to 3, it has to be a quarterback. It's just a matter of which one. And the talk has been all over the place for the last month. Everything lately has been all about Mac Jones versus Trey Lance. Justin Fields was the QB2 for a while, and now for many he's like the QB4 or 5 coming off the board. And many have him falling well out of the top 5. So most of the attention is on Lance versus Mac Jones, and the Mac Jones pick has never made sense to me because his ceiling compared to where Jimmy Garoppolo is and what he brings to an offense, if it's higher, is it worth all those picks and the time for him to reach that ceiling? That just has never made sense to me. He could be Kyle Shanahan's favorite quarterback in the draft, but that decision just doesn't make a lot of sense. Trey Lance, I could see, because I love his fit in that offense, and he offers something very different from Jimmy Garoppolo with his running ability, and he's very strong, and he's got this massive arm. He's a fun quarterback prospect with a lot of developing to do still. He doesn't have a lot of experience, and most of it was in 2019 when he had an incredible year and did not throw interceptions. That is very impressive. I love to see Trey Lance in this offense. I think it'd be a very fun pick. I also wonder how much of this is just about, having the rookie contract at quarterback. That would help it make more sense if they wanted Jones, because there is a massive difference in contract compared to Jimmy Garoppolo, and you could do something with that money. But here's my pick for the San Francisco 49ers. Their new quarterback, it's going to be Justin Fields. That was my initial reaction when they made the trade. I'm going to stick with it because it's the one that makes the most logical sense. Fields has experience. He's a really good prospect. I love his accuracy, his mobility, and in the Shanahan offense, I really want to see him play it. I think that I like him better as a prospect compared to Trey Lance. Maybe Lance has the higher ceiling. I think Fields is more ready to play right away. And this is the pick that simply makes the most sense. Justin Fields is very smart, accurate, mobile. There's so much you could do with him in that offense, and Shanahan could get back to what he was doing with RG3 back in 2012 with some of the read option and just being able to open up the offense. I don't know why you'd trade up to just have maybe an improved offense with Mac Jones. He doesn't bring anything new to the table that you don't have with Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe he does it at a little bit higher efficiency or something. I don't know. But I just don't think it's ever made sense, and I think the media has been played like they were last year. Going through my mock draft a year ago, I forgot about how everybody was convinced that Miami was going to take Justin Herbert, and then Tua would probably go to the Chargers, and it didn't play out that way. I'm going to ignore the noise here. Maybe it ends up being Lance, but I'm going Justin Fields at 3, and we're moving on. At 4, the Atlanta Falcons and their new regime need to be very honest with themselves about where the team is at. Missing the playoffs each of the last 3 seasons, and having the top players on the roster all aging. We've had Julio Jones trade rumors after he played 9 games last season, his least since 2013. Matt Ryan's getting up there. He's been playing for a while. And I just don't think that the team is all that good. I was actually pretty high on them going into last year. I thought people were sleeping on them. Turns out I should have been as well. I was wrong. And the Falcons were not very competitive, although they destroyed Minnesota in that one game. I didn't even watch the 4th quarter. Jefferson went off in that one and I missed it. From a salary cap standpoint, this team is also in a really bad spot over the next couple of years. A lot is tied up with Ryan, Julio, Grady Jarrett, and Jake Matthews. And next year, you're looking at a $48 million cap hit for Matt Ryan. So the Falcons have to ask themselves, can we win with this core, or do we need to start thinking about the future? And I believe they have to think about the future. You might think that the Falcons should take a quarterback because they won't pick this high again. I think they should take a quarterback, and I think they likely will pick this high again. I just don't think they've added enough in the past few years to help the roster, as their key players over the past decade are getting older. I don't think they've done a very good job, and that's why there's a brand new regime in Atlanta, and I think they're going to take Trey Lance. You don't have to rush him into play right away, and boom, you got a better red zone package right away, because you can create a handful of things for Trey Lance to do while he's learning behind Matt Ryan, getting that experience on the bench. It's difficult to pass on Kyle Pitts here, and you always want to believe that, like, Matt Ryan and Julio, if they just click for a year, they can get back to the postseason, but it's been a few years, and I think that you're at this spot where you can take Trey Lance, and he's better than most quarterback 4s you're ever going to have a chance to draft. You might have more chances because this team could be very boom or bust, but I think they should take Trey Lance, have him learn behind Matt Ryan, and I like him as a fit in the Arthur Smith offense. I really want to see him go somewhere where his mobility is going to be used. They're calling a lot of play action, and there's a very creative play caller in place, and this could be a great landing spot for Lance. So if the quarterbacks go 1 through 4, it changes the whole dynamic of the draft. Now we're not talking about the Patriots trading up or the Broncos trading up. And this offseason, I felt like the Patriots were preparing for a potential trade up. I think they'd love to get a guy like Justin Fields, but if he doesn't fall, then there's no shot. So I don't think the Patriots are going to be making a move here for a quarterback. And if the quarterbacks go 1 through 4, there's a lot less trading, I think, happening on round 1. Because if you're trading up, it's likely for a quarterback. So I only have 1 trade in my mock draft, and that's where I already think it's a horrible mock draft. I wasn't creative enough to think of a few more. So let's move on to number 5. Here we have Cincinnati, a year after selecting Joe Burrow number 1, and he showed a lot of potential early on, but he got hurt, tore his ACL, did not finish the season. And that's why I think they're taking Penei Sewell. I don't think that their answer for protection was simply just bring in Riley Reef. I think there's going to be some players moving around here, but it's a deep receiver class, and I think people want to reunite Burrow and Jamar Chase, and that's what I hope happens, but I don't think it happens. They're going to take Penei Sewell, I believe, because he's one of the best tackle prospects in a while, and it's a chance to really elevate an offensive line that's been bad for a while. Jonah Williams and Riley Reef are not good enough for you to say, we don't need Penei Sewell. He can play guard right away. I don't think Reef does. He's played tackle for almost 10 years now. You're not going to all of a sudden play him at guard. He wouldn't want that anyway. It'd probably ruin the value of the rest of his career, I'd imagine. So I think you bring in Sewell, figure it out. Play guard for a year, move up the tackle next year, and you have much better protection for Joe Burrow with the chance to go and get a receiver in the 2nd round. We're on now to number 6, the Miami Dolphins. They move down, they move up. They're likely still going to get a top playmaker for Tua Tagovailoa. It depends if Jamar Chase goes 5 and if Pitts goes 4. There's a huge domino effect here. They could have the first skill player or the 3rd skill player. Well, in this case, number 1, and you gotta take Kyle Pitts if you're Miami. Mike Gesicki's fun. Kyle Pitts can change your offense and really elevate things. He is an unbelievable prospect. At his size, what he's able to do as like a tight end receiver hybrid, the ceiling is astronomical, and you really can't compare him to any other player. He's so unique. I think they'd be happy with any of the top receivers, but if Pitts is available, I don't think you pass. Now at number 7, here's a team I think that could be looking to move down. I don't here because of who's available, but I think the Lions just have so much building to do. They probably realize that next year is not going to be great for them, so you could just try to accumulate more talent. But come on, here at number 7, I think Jamar Chase is too good to pass up. He's a dominant wide receiver. His season with Joe Burrow was so much fun to watch. They were just on a completely different level. What he was doing, as young as he was against top competition, makes it look so easy. And this will help soften the blow after losing Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. You do bring in Tyrell Williams and Rashad Perriman, and I don't think that enough credit's being given to how good those players can be. It's been a couple years for Williams. I know that Perriman really shined late in his Tampa Bay tenure, so I don't think those two are just like nobodies at receiver. I'm not a huge Jared Goff guy, but if they had a receiver here, the playmaking situation's going to be, I think, adequate enough. With Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, you should be able to generate some points with those players. So that takes us to number 8, the Carolina Panthers. This is a spot where I think, like, of the blue chip players, you're probably not going to get one. The board can fall in a way to where you might get Penei Sewell, but in this case, I have them going with Rashawn Slater, 2nd tackle off the board. I think if you want to get the potential out of Sam Darnold, you better be prepared to protect him. I think it's worth a shot here with them being at number 8, not being able to get one of the top quarterbacks, unless they want Mac Jones to come in and compete. But I think that at this point, you got the playmakers, you have a quarterback you think is worth giving this chance to. Protect him now and add a good tackle in Rashawn Slater. Let's go to number 9. Denver's an interesting team because the roster is pretty solid. I like this team a lot. They probably wanted to trade up for someone like Justin Fields. I think that they've likely been trying to work on a trade like that for a while now. And then yesterday, they trade for Teddy Bridgewater. The timing of that to me is more interesting than the fact that they traded for Teddy. I like Teddy. He's not coming off a very good season. I don't think he solves quarterback for you. And I know that they could still be looking at quarterback. But to me, the timing of it, what it said is that we wanted to move up. We can't because the quarterbacks are going to be gone. And that's part of why I have quarterback going 1 through 4. I already liked that setup. And to me, like the timing of the Teddy trade, I don't think that they're banking on another quarterback being there that they wanted to bring in. Unless they like Mac Jones and you have like him versus Locke versus Teddy. I don't think it happens. So this is my one and only trade down here in the draft. Going down to 12 as the Eagles come up to get past both teams ahead of them in division. And I have the Philadelphia Eagles moving up to 9, taking Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, out of Alabama. They took Jalen Reagor a year ago, but I think there's still a lot of work to do for wide receiver if you want to get the most out of Jalen Hurts. And they've got to attack receiver, I think, pretty early in this draft. Although they might go corner and try later on. If you have a chance to go after Devontae Smith here and it doesn't cost much in a trade up, I think you got to add somebody who has just a great all-around skill set. He's so explosive, great route runner. He can make the tough catches look simple. I know he's only 170 pounds, but I don't think that's going to impact his draft stock as much as some people are thinking. That brings us to the Dallas Cowboys at 10. Here's a pretty common one. I just think it makes sense and the board sets up perfectly. Patrick Surtain. Can't wait to see him play after a dominant career at Alabama. The size and the physicality makes him my favorite cornerback in this class. And I think that Dallas really needs the boost there. So it seems like one that's almost too easy, but it just makes sense, so we're moving on. 11. What are the New York Giants going to do? This is where the mock started to get really tough because I keep seeing everybody mock them a wide receiver. And I'm like, it's Dave Gettleman we're talking about. He thought that just trading away Odell Beckham and having 4 slot receivers was adequate. He added Kenny Galladay and Kyle Rudolph. You think he's not done there? He's going to spend the first pick on a receiver too? I'm just going to go in a different direction. I don't think Dave Gettleman does that. I think that he sees a chance here, though, with all these offensive players coming off the board, to take Micah Parsons, linebacker out of Penn State. Outside of corner, it's hard to see exactly where the top defensive players end up going. I could see Parsons dropping a lot more, the edge rushers as well. But I got Parsons here going to the Giants. Linebacker hasn't been a strength of theirs. It feels like I've mocked them a linebacker many times over the years. And let's remember that Dave Gettleman in Carolina selected Luke Kuechly a little bit higher than people expected. And maybe he sees a chance for another impact linebacker, a 3-down player that can do it all, to become a cornerstone of the defense for years to come. Now we go to 12, and this is where I had Denver trading down with Philadelphia. It was difficult to decide exactly what to do with them because I think they could do a number of different things. Offensive line, maybe an edge rusher, get younger there, maybe another corner, but they made some moves there this offseason. So I'm going to give them Christian Darrisaw. I saw a report that they were thinking about releasing Jawan James, and he did not play last year. He opted out, and there's a new regime in Denver, so they might want to get out of that contract potentially. And this is where I think the value is in the draft. Obviously, tackles should go fairly early. Good chance here for Denver if they're interested. But if they like where Jawan James is at, then I don't know. There's a report as well saying he looks great in off-season workouts. So I really don't know about Denver. But regardless, I like this spot here for Darrisaw. And with NFL Predict the Pick rules, being close gets you some points. On we go to pick 13, the LA Chargers. I like what they've done this offseason a lot, being very serious about upgrading their offensive line. If Darrisaw's available, I could see him being the pick, and they probably will draft a tackle at some point. But I have them going in a different direction here. Wide receiver, Jalen Waddle from Alabama. I look at this offense, and yes, they could use a tackle, but I think they could also use some dominant downfield speed to complement Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. I do like their depth receivers. Jalen Guyton's a guy that can get downfield, but I think here, when I went through it, I found it tough to pass on Jalen Waddle and add to this offense. You've already added offensive lineman. How about a playmaker now for Justin Herbert? And then come back round 2 maybe. Take another tackle. That takes us to Minnesota, number 14. My favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings. Every year they go into the draft with a glaring hole, and it's rarely filled, so I feel like I'm talking about offensive line every single season. When they took Laquan Treadwell, it was obvious. Receiver was a need. When they took Garrett Bradbury, it was obvious. They had to draft a center. I feel like guard and tackle is that obvious once again, but I still feel like they might end up taking an edge rusher or something here. But they spent all offseason on defense. Patrick Peterson, Dalvin Tomlinson, Xavier Woods. They didn't have much money to begin with. On offense, they added Mason Cole. That's the literally only addition to the offense. This has to be an offensive lineman. And the Vikings have shown they can't develop offensive linemen, so you better take one early. Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC is the pick here. I think they're going to like his flexibility, especially after drafting Ezra Cleveland last year, another versatile offensive lineman. And if you have 2 guys who can play guard and tackle, hopefully it fits together to where they're playing their best positions and it can be either spot. But I think Elijah Vera Tucker is a pick here I see commonly mocked, and it makes a lot of sense. Minnesota's all about their zone running game, but hopefully they see a chance here to also boost the pass protection and take it. Or Mike Zimmer takes over the draft and it's Jalen Phillips or a corner. Let's move on now to 15, the New England Patriots. I think they wanted to move up. Now it's time for plan B. I don't have them taking a quarterback. I think there's some serious value here the way my board has fallen, so I gotta have this player coming off the board, and I think for like the style of defense New England plays, he's a perfect fit. J.C. Horn out of South Carolina. They like these cornerbacks that are great in man coverage and can make plays. And while cornerback is not an immediate need, it's never a bad idea to take one. And because you need 3, you'll likely need one at some point in the near future anyway. On to 16. I think that if Jalen Waddle makes it here, he's the pick for Arizona. Receiver for them is an interesting possibility. I have them going with Greg Newsome out of Northwestern to help replace Patrick Peterson. They don't necessarily have to do this, but I think boosting up the secondary would make a lot of sense for them. And again, it's where the value I think is here at the top. I think the corner class at the very top, it has some really intriguing players that I think could become dominant number 1 corners. Newsome, Horn, Surtain primarily. Also like Asante Samuel Jr., but it just looks like he might go a little bit later because he doesn't have the size as a lot of the other corners do. So I think Greg Newsome here, you can plug him in, helping replace Patrick Peterson. Otherwise, maybe on the offensive side they look to add a receiver. Just doesn't make sense here with my board as it's falling. Next up at 17, the Las Vegas Raiders. I was really tempted to just go to the defensive players in the available board and just scroll down and then pick from there, because they always seem to overdraft a defender. They did it with Cleveland Ferrell. They did it with Damon Arnett last season. But I think I have a pick here that I could see them making. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Really excited to see where he goes. And I'm not sure I'd love, him going to the Raiders. I think that maybe some other defenses would better utilize him. But they have a need. Defense, just in general, has to get better for the Raiders. And you're up against Travis Kelce twice a year, and I think that could be a major motivator behind a pick like this. Owusu-Koramoah is a really interesting linebacker. It depends how you play him. You've got to create kind of his own position. I know I was watching Bryant McFadden from CBS talk about him and making comparisons to how Jeremy Chin was used with Carolina last year, and I 100% agree. You've got to move him around. He should do some blitzing, some mirroring of the tight ends, perhaps on third down. I don't think that he's going to be the best run defender, but that's not where the value is in the NFL. Owusu Koromoa has a chance to be a potential tight end eraser and a playmaker at linebacker that you're not going to find very often. Now we get into the second half of the draft, and I didn't feel very good about really any of these picks. I thought it was very difficult to separate the players, partially because I don't know them as well as people who analyze the draft a lot deeper. So I tried to make some fits here that I thought made some sense. With Miami's second pick at 18, earlier I had them going with Kyle Pitts. Now I have them going defense and adding Kwity Paye, edge rusher out of Michigan. They could really use a pass rush boost in Miami, and I think Paye has the upside and the athleticism, and I'm expecting him to be the first edge off the board. I think he'll be in the top 20, as high as potentially Minnesota if they want to go in that direction. So I have Miami going with Kwity Paye. And at 19, the Washington football team takes Mac Jones, and he finally gets his call. There's probably going to be a quarterback falling. I don't know if it's Mac Jones, I don't know if it's Justin Fields, but here I have it being Mac Jones going to the Washington football team. I think they'd love to add somebody here to help for another playoff run, but you gotta remember, they won the NFC East with a 7-9 record. And they still have some work to do, and they don't know who their quarterback is in 2022. They might know in 2021, but here's a good chance to take Mac Jones, learn behind Ryan Fitzpatrick, and maybe he gets a chance this year or next. The Chicago Bears, I really didn't know what to do once I got to them, because I think they could be in the market for a corner, maybe Greg Newsome, but he's off the board. But I think here, Azeez Ojulari is a solid pick for them with two older edge rushers now, Mac getting up there, the veteran Robert Quinn. It's always nice to have at least a third rusher to help spell those other starters when they need a break. And I think that they'll probably just be looking at building up their defense and maybe adding a playmaker for Andy Dalton. Ultimately, it's a defensive football team, so I think going defense in the first round is their likely route. That'll take us to 21, and I think every mock draft has them taking a tackle, including this one. I think that they could be looking to trade down, depending on if there's one that they prefer, because I think this tier gets very clustered. But I have them staying put at 21 to select Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. That would fill the need at left tackle and help them continue to have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL to protect Carson Wentz as he tries to resurrect his career in Indianapolis. Next at 22, the Titans have lost a lot of players this year, so they have a number of possibilities I think they'll be considering once they're on the clock. And what I've seen recently a lot is Elijah Moore, a player I really like. And sure, that could be the pick. But like Minnesota, they're one of those teams that still plays with a lot of two receiver formations. They played 11 personnel, looks like 38% of the time last year, which is second lowest next to Minnesota. So when you're playing with two receivers primarily, I tend to look at projecting some size and physicality, winning on the outside one-on-one. If you think Moore can do that, that's fine. I'm going to be giving them wide receiver Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. Now, Minnesota listed him a little bit bigger than he was measured at. He's 6 foot 190, but I still think that he's got a very complete skill set. I like his route running and his releases. He's a really fun wide receiver. I think he goes either here or to Baltimore a handful of picks later. But we'll go to 23 now, the New York Jets. They took Zach Wilson at the top, and this is another pick where I had a little bit of trouble trying to find a player I loved. So I kind of defaulted to the value and the upside here with them taking Jason Oweh. I feel like they've been trying to add some edge rush talent for a number of years. And they brought in Carl Lawson. I like him a lot, but they shouldn't be done there. I have no idea the order of the edge rushers when they'll go. I think it could be really weird because I'm not sure if anybody really stands out as like the best or the second best. I think it's going to come down to preference and if you think you can develop a guy. So I have Oweh going to the Jets, leading us into 24 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm not giving them a running back. Their offensive line was the reason they couldn't run the ball last year, and I don't think Najee Harris is playing guard, so he's not the pick. He could be. Like, they might want to do that, but I don't have them doing that. I have them taking Landon Dickerson, finding the next center of the Steelers after the retirement of Marquise Pouncey. I think that they could go in either direction, but to me, going offensive line sounds like the smarter thing to do, and I think the Steelers are a smart organization. Taking a first-round running back right now just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the guys they've had success with recently were definitely not first-round picks. Continuing on, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars for the second time. Now, I'm going to tell you what I want them to do. This is not in my mock draft. They took Trevor Lawrence, number 1. I'm thinking a lot about that offense, thinking about Urban Meyer and all those great Florida teams. What I really want here for the Jacksonville Jaguars is to take Trevor Lawrence and then bring in his teammate, Travis Etienne, my favorite running back in this class. I would love to see him in this offense. Can't wait to see what they come up with, but I don't think they're going to do it, but it would be super fun to keep those two together. I have them going with Trayvon Merrick, the first safety and the only safety coming off the board here in this round. I just think that there's a big hole at safety with this team, and Merrick has the ability to play free safety and make plays on the football downfield, and that seems to be one of the team's biggest needs right now. Although they could go in a number of different directions because there's a lot more this roster needs. But I think Trayvon Merrick is both a good need and value filled at this spot. Past Jacksonville, we now have the Cleveland Browns. Not mocking a top 10 pick to the Browns. This is a different season. The Browns really have a solid roster. I do think a playmaker makes sense here, but I have them going with Christian Barmore. I think an interior pass rusher makes just as much sense as a playmaker. And Barmore, I think with his upside, he's going to go somewhere in this first round. It's hard to project where. Doesn't have a ton of experience, finished his career really well in the college football playoff, and I think that I can see this pick going through. Next up at 27 overall, the Baltimore Ravens are on the clock, and I think they'd like to go with a playmaker. But I had Rashad Bateman go off the board. I think he'd be the ideal receiver to add for them, and if he's off the board, I'm not sure where they go. So I have them taking edge rusher Joe Tryon instead. I think that if they don't get the one or two guys they're looking for at receiver, they can take edge here and then come back to this deep receiver class later on and take a chance on someone like Tamarian Terry or something and see if you can add another starter. But I think they'll be attacking it somewhat early, potentially even trading up. On we go to the New Orleans Saints at 28 now, and I really have no idea where this player is going to go. But I have them taking Caleb Farley, cornerback out of Virginia Tech. The injury and medical history with him is going to be the main topic. If that weren't the case, he'd probably be the first cornerback off the board. But the question is how healthy is his back going to be? Is this going to be a problem that is reoccurring? He's got to pass the medical. You've got to be confident you're going to get some good years out of him. But I think that he goes somewhere here late in the first round. Ideally, I think he goes to a team that says, okay, we want the upside, and we can afford for this not to work. So I don't think he goes to one of the cornerback needy teams early. Although I'm not sure how good the Saints will be this year, I could see them being the team to take a chance with their need at cornerback right now. Next at 29, what on earth are the Green Bay Packers going to do? A first-round wide receiver? Not since Javon Walker many years ago. I would have given them Farley if I didn't have him going 28. The Packers never end up with like an exciting draft class people are talking about, but they usually take pretty good players. So I have them taking Zaven Collins, linebacker out of Tulsa. He's a big off-ball athletic linebacker, and I think he's the kind of player the Packers could be going after here to fill a role that they definitely have a need at. And I actually think this off-ball linebacker class is going to produce potentially some really interesting players that don't even go in the first round. I don't know which ones could go in there. I've seen Jamin Davis end up in there, but I think that there's something interesting about guys like Nick Bolton, Jabril Cox. I think potentially we look back in a couple of years and the linebackers were a bit overlooked, but we'll see how it all plays out. Next at 30, the Bills were a tough one as well. I could have given them a running back. I just don't see them going there. I have them selecting edge rusher Jalen Phillips out of Miami. I think he'll slide a little bit because of the medical concerns. Maybe there's a chance he falls out of the first round entirely. But here, I'm looking at this roster thinking that they've got to add some edge rush talent. It's not a team with a ton of holes. They could maybe add a playmaker. There's always room for that on offense, and I think they will on day 2. But right here, an edge rusher in a class that's not super deep to help complement Jerry Hughes. I think it's just a very big need for them, and there's a lot of upside with Jalen Phillips. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens for the second time. I believe they're going to be tempted to combine their first 2 picks to move up, maybe, to get a wide receiver, but they didn't fall anywhere nearly far enough in this case, unless they were to trade up for Rashad Bateman. But after the Orlando Brown trade, I think they're going to be looking at replacing him with a tackle, so I have them taking Dylan Raduns from North Dakota State. I think they have to do a lot for this offensive line so that when it is time for them to be in drop back pass mode, there's a bit better protection for Lamar Jackson. That was a big problem a year ago. So you definitely don't want to have a massive drop off after you just traded away one of your best players. Of course, they didn't have Ronnie Stanley for much of the year, so getting him back helps a lot. But you want to make sure you have a good right tackle as well ready to step in. And I also think that adding Kevin Zeitler was a good move for them, so I expect them to take a playmaker at some point. They did add Sammy Watkins, but I wouldn't expect them to be done. We now have one more pick to talk about, number 32, a team that just doesn't really have a hole. You could take away their first round pick and they're just fine. So it's whatever they want to do in Tampa Bay. Take Najee Harris, just go get a running back, go get a playmaker, whatever you want to do. I have them selecting wide receiver Kadarius Toney because why not? Another dynamic playmaker with run after the catch ability, return ability. You can line them up in the backfield. I could see Etienne, Harris, Toney, but I just kind of feel like a playmaker here. Tom Brady can never have enough of those. So that completes my 2021 NFL mock draft. Had a lot of fun putting this together. The top rated players on NFL.com that fell out of my first round were Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, Elijah Moore, Javonte Williams. The running backs are really interesting. I'm of course excited to see where they end up, and hopefully it's to fun offenses. But I have no idea what to expect today. With a draft after last college football season, there's less information about these players than really ever, with no combine, limited play time for a lot of players. Some haven't played in over a year, so I'm expecting a lot of surprises, and maybe there are even some players who are way overdrafted because they have more college tape out there and they've just shown they can play at their level for longer. So we'll see how it all plays out. Going to be an awesome first night of the draft. Cannot wait. We'll talk about it soon on the channel. Hope you enjoyed the video today, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.